You know, I've been thinking about something that might explain what you've been carrying lately. That feeling you can't quite name, like your heart is holding a weight that doesn't belong to you but also doesn't feel entirely foreign. It's almost like you're standing between two versions of yourself, and you're not sure which one you're becoming. Maybe you've noticed it in the small things first. The way conversations that used to light you up now leave you feeling drained. Or how you're choosing silence more often, not because you're angry, but because you're learning what deserves your voice and what doesn't. You might have caught yourself pulling away from certain people, not out of bitterness, but because something in you has started recognizing the difference between connection and obligation. And if I'm honest with you, I think what you're experiencing isn't something to fear, it's something to honor. Because God doesn't shift the ground beneath us without preparing us to stand differently. I want you to hear me when I say this. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding what was never meant to last. There's a passage in Isaiah that says, "He will give beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness." And sometimes that exchange doesn't feel beautiful at first. It feels like burning. It feels like everything you thought was stable is suddenly crumbling, and you're left standing in the rubble wondering if you did something wrong. But friend, what if the rubble was never your foundation? What if God is clearing the ground so something real can finally take root? I think one of the most misunderstood parts of spiritual growth is that it doesn't always feel holy. It feels messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes even lonely. You start seeing patterns you used to excuse, hearing tones you used to ignore, feeling tension in spaces that used to feel safe. And the enemy will try to convince you that this awareness is a sign you're becoming bitter or judgmental. But the truth is, discernment isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And God is giving you the grace to see things as they truly are, not as you wished they were. That's not bitterness, that's healing. You're not pushing people away because you're cold. You're learning boundaries because you finally realized you were built for something more than being everyone's emotional resting place. I know it's hard when the people who once celebrated you now seem distant or confused by your changes. But listen, not everyone is meant to understand the version of you that God is refining. Some people were only ever comfortable with the version of you that made them comfortable. And when you stop bending to fit their expectations, it shakes the dynamic. That's not your burden to carry. Jesus himself said in Matthew's gospel that a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. Even he wasn't fully embraced by those who thought they knew him best. So if your growth is making others uncomfortable, remember, transformation isn't meant to be convenient for the crowd. It's meant to be faithful to the call. And right now, you're being called into something deeper. I want to talk to you about what it means to feel different without knowing exactly why. You wake up and everything looks the same. Same room, same routine, same responsibilities, but something inside you has shifted. It's like you're seeing through a new lens, and suddenly the things that used to matter don't hold the same weight. You're not interested in proving yourself anymore. You're not racing to defend your name or chase approval from people who were never truly paying attention in the first place. And that shift, that quiet internal recalibration, that's what I believe is a divine realignment. God is resetting your priorities, and he's doing it gently, not with lightning or thunder, but with a steady, persistent whisper that says, "This is no longer for you." You might feel it in your spirit when someone asks you to do something that once would have been automatic, and now your first response is hesitation. Not rebellion, just pause. Because you're learning to check in with your soul before you say yes with your mouth. And that pause, that sacred space between the ask and the answer, that's where your freedom lives. I think a lot of us were taught that being a good person meant being available to everyone all the time. That love looks like sacrifice until you're empty. But friend, even Jesus withdrew to be alone and pray. Even he set boundaries with the crowds and chose when to engage and when to step back. So if you're feeling the need to protect your peace more fiercely than before, you're not being selfish, you're being obedient. You're recognizing that you can't pour from a depleted well, and God never asked you to. He asked you to stay connected to Him, the living water, so that what flows from you is sustainable and pure. Now, I want to gently address something that might be sitting heavy on your heart. Maybe you've been feeling guilty about the changes you're going through. Maybe you're wondering if you're becoming too guarded, too cautious, too different from the person people used to know. And I just want to remind you, growth will always look like change to people who wanted you to stay the same. But to God, it looks like obedience. It looks like trust. It looks like someone who's finally ready to walk in the fullness of what He's prepared. There's a difference between being hardened and being whole. And what you're experiencing isn't bitterness creeping in, it's wisdom taking root. You're not closing your heart, you're guarding it with the kind of care it always deserved. Proverbs tells us to guard our heart above all else, for from it flows the wellspring of life. And for too long, maybe you left the gates wide open. Maybe you let anyone walk in and take what they wanted, your time, your energy, your peace, without ever asking if they were safe. But now you're standing at the entrance. You're asking questions. You're paying attention to fruit, not just words. And that's not cold, that's maturity. I also want you to know that it's okay if you don't have all the answers right now. It's okay if you can't explain to people why you've changed or why certain things don't sit right with you anymore. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of your spiritual journey. You don't need to justify your growth to people who aren't willing to grow with you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply honor what you feel and trust that God is leading you, even when the path isn't clear, even when it feels like home was just a place you outgrew. And God is building you something better, something that fits who you're becoming, not who you used to be. I want to pause here and say something that might feel tender, but I believe it's true. If you've been feeling more emotional lately, if you've cried more in the last few months than you have in years, that's not weakness, that's release. God is clearing out what you've been holding on to for too long. The grief you didn't process, the disappointment you tried to swallow, the rejection you convinced yourself didn't hurt. All of it is coming up now because you're finally in a place where you can handle it. You're finally strong enough to feel it and not be destroyed by it. And I know it doesn't feel like strength when you're on your knees in the middle of the night asking God why it still hurts. But friend, the fact that you're still here, still pressing in, still asking, that is strength. That is faith. And God sees it. He's not disappointed in your tears. He's collecting every single one. The Psalms remind us that God keeps track of all our sorrows, that He's recorded each one in His book, and He's stored our tears in a bottle. That means nothing you're feeling is wasted. Every moment of pain is seen, held, and will be redeemed. So don't rush the process. Don't try to skip to the part where you're healed and whole and have it all together. Sit in this season. Let it do its work. Because transformation doesn't happen in the highlight reel. It happens in the hidden places, the quiet moments, the battles no one else sees. And you're winning, even when it doesn't feel like it. Now, let's talk about the relationships that have felt strained. The people who used to feel close but now feel distant. The friendships that once brought life but now feel like labor. I want you to hear this with grace. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into the next chapter. And that's not a punishment for them or for you. It's just the truth of growth. Some people are seasonal, and when the season shifts, so does the connection. That doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It doesn't mean the memories don't matter. It just means that what you needed from each other has been fulfilled, and now you're both being called in different directions. And it's okay to grieve that. It's okay to miss people and still know that you can't go back. Because going back would mean shrinking, and God didn't bring you this far to watch you fold yourself back into a space you've already outgrown. Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And maybe this is your time to refrain. Not out of anger, but out of honoring what God is doing in you. Some of the people you're releasing were never meant to go where you're going. And that's not a reflection of their worth or yours. It's just a reflection of purpose. You're being refined for something specific, and not everyone has the capacity to handle the heat of that refining process. So let them go with love.
bless them from a distance, and trust that God is making room for the people who are aligned with where you're headed, not where you've been. I also want to talk to you about the dreams that have felt dormant, the things you used to be passionate about that now feel like faint echoes in the background of your life. You might be wondering if you've lost your fire, if you've given up, if you're no longer the person you thought you'd become. But I believe what's happening is God is sifting through what you thought you wanted and showing you what you were truly made for. Sometimes we carry dreams that were planted by other people's expectations, by culture, by comparison, and God, in His kindness, will let those dreams die so that the real ones can breathe. So if you're feeling a loss of passion right now, don't panic. You're not losing yourself, you're finding yourself. You're being stripped of the noise so you can finally hear the whisper of what you were created to do. And when